poisonous grass. Rampo, Edogawa. It was a fine, clear autumn day. A close friend of mine came to visit, and after a lively conversation, he said, "What a pleasant day it is. How about taking a little walk nearby?" So the two of us set out toward an open field not far from my house, which stood in a rather outlying district. In the field, overgrown with weeds, autumn insects chirped faintly, even in the daytime. A narrow brook, scarcely more than a foot across, trickled through the grass. Here and there rose small mounds. We sat ourselves down halfway up, one such mound, gazing first at the cloudless, transparent sky, then at the little stream running just beneath our feet, and at the countless varieties of tiny weeds growing along its banks. We lingered there for quite some time, sometimes sighing, "Ah, it really is autumn." Then, by chance, my eyes fell upon a certain clump of plants growing in the damp soil at the brook's edge. "Say, do you know what that is?" I asked my friend, but he was the sort of man who had no interest at all in the features of the natural world, and replied curtly, "No idea." Yet even for a man so indifferent to plants and flowers, this one, in particular, was bound to arouse interest. No, precisely because he was blind to the charms of nature, he would be all the more drawn to the peculiar grimness that this plant possessed. Thus, with a touch of pride in my unusual knowledge, I began to explain its use. "That is called X. It grows just about anywhere. It isn't what you'd call a violent poison. Most people take it for an ordinary wild plant, paying it no heed. But in fact, this plant is a most effective abortifacient. In times when no other medicines were available, this was the standard remedy. Old midwives, you see, often used it as a secret means to bring on miscarriage. Yes, it was this very plant." On hearing that, my friend, as I had expected, was immediately seized by curiosity. He pressed me eagerly, asking in great detail just how it was to be used. Teasing him, I said, "So then, it seems you have an urgent need for it, eh?" And yet, I went on to explain in full, delighted with the chance to talk about such hidden knowledge. "You take a stalk about the width of your palm and peel off the skin. Then you..." With gestures to accompany my words for telling of such secret things is entertaining in itself, I gave a minute explanation, all the while watching my friend's fascinated expression as he listened with keen attention. From that talk of abortion, our conversation naturally drifted toward the question of birth control. On that subject, my friend and I, being of the younger generation, were of one mind. We were both advocates of limiting births. What we discussed at length was how such measures were often misapplied, practiced needlessly among the wealthy, while in the working classes, many did not even know such movements existed. Why, even here in our own neighborhood, there was a row of tenements, little better than a slum, and every household there seemed to be burdened with more children than they could ever possibly need. As we debated, what came unbidden into my mind was the family living just behind my house. The old postman and his household. The man had served at the third-class post office in our town for more than 10 years, earning scarcely 50 yen a month, with no more than 20 yen apiece in bonuses at midsummer and year's end. He was a drinker, never missing his evening's sake, yet at the same time, a thoroughly conscientious fellow, the sort who had likely never missed a single day of work in all those long years. He must have been past 50, but, having married late, he already had 6 children, the eldest a girl of 12. Even 10 yen in rent he had to pay. How, I wondered, could they possibly live? Each evening, the eldest daughter, that frail 12-year-old, could be seen clutching a half-show bottle and going off to buy her father's alcohol. From the upstairs window of my house, I watched that pitiful figure pass by every day. At night, the 3-year-old boy, not yet fully weaned, would cry in a feeble, sickly voice, perhaps a kind of infantile hysteria throughout the long hours until dawn. The 5-year-old girl, his sister, suffered from boils that broke out across her head and face, and when night came, she too would scream and sob, whether from pain or from itching, like one seized with hysteria. And their mother, about 40 years old, what must it feel like for her to look on such misery? Yet even now, in her womb, another child of 5 months' term was growing. Nor was this plight unique to the postman's family behind my house. The same held true for his neighbors, and for those behind them as well, so many households, overflowing with children. And in the wider world beyond, there must be countless families even more wretched than that poor postman's, 10 times more unhappy still. As we went on with our aimless discussion, the short autumn day had already begun to fade. The once blue sky turned to the shade of diluted ink. Pale, whitish lights were lit in the houses nearby, and sitting there upon the bare earth suddenly felt oddly chill. So we rose to our feet, my friend, to go his way, I to go mine. But just as I stood up, I sensed something on the crest of the hill behind me, where, until then, I had had my back turned. Turning casually, I saw her set against the dimming sky, standing stock still like a wooden statue. For a split second, perhaps because there was nothing behind her but sky, she appeared to my eyes as some enormous, grotesque being. Yet, the very next instant, I realized it was something far more terrifying than any apparition. For there, petrified in place, stood the pregnant wife of that wretched postman who lived just behind my house. The muscles of my face stiffened. I could not, of course, manage any greeting. She, for her part, gazed off with hollow eyes, staring into some void, never once turning in my direction. This ignorant woman of 40 had, needless to say, heard our entire conversation. We turned toward home as if fleeing. Both of us fell into an uneasy silence, scarcely even exchanging words of farewell. Above all, I was deeply shaken by the thought of what that woman had overheard and by the dreadful possibilities it suggested. Once home, I found her image haunting me the more I thought. She must have been listening from the moment I began explaining the use of that plant. At that time, I had surely exaggerated, explaining how easily, how painlessly, an abortion could be carried out with it. What would that child-burdened, pregnant woman naturally think upon hearing such a thing? To bring her child into the world, she would have to scrape together money she could ill afford. Nearing old age, she would still have to nurse the newborn at her breast, carry the 3-year-old upon her back, all while toiling at washing and cooking. Her husband, who already bellowed nightly without fail, would only shout all the louder. The 5-year-old daughter's hysterical fits would grow worse. All these countless miseries, if they could be swept away without danger, by nothing more than a single nameless weed, would she not, inevitably, think along those lines? What then was I afraid of? Was I not myself an advocate of birth control? If that woman, following my very teaching, were to cast away one needless life, consigning it from darkness back into darkness, how could that be called a crime? By reason, I could think so. Yet reason could not still this trembling. Instead, as though I had committed some ghastly murder myself, I was seized by a nameless, ungovernable fear. Somehow, it felt wrong to remain still, restless. I wandered about my house. I climbed to the second floor and peered from the veranda that overlooked the field, straining to see through the dusk toward the hill. The postman's wife was no longer there. Without reason, I dashed down the stairs, missing 2 or 3 steps, raising a clatter as foolish as it was loud. Then I hurried to the front door, slipped on my clogs, slid the lattice door open, shut it again, and repeated such pointless motions. At last, I could not resist. I had to go once more to the foot of that hill. In the near darkness, where I could scarcely see a yard ahead, I walked with a shrinking heart, glancing nervously over my shoulder lest someone should see me, until I reached the hill. Through the gray mist, the black trickle of the narrow brook glimmered faintly. From the grass, a short distance off, some insect shrilled its piercing song. I stood rigid, searching for the plant. There it was, jutting up from among the low weeds, with its thick stalk and heavy round leaves, grotesque as a monster. Yet I saw at once that its stalk had been cleanly broken, halfway up. It stood there, lopsided and forlorn, like a cripple missing one arm. I froze, chilled to the marrow, in the gathering dark. Before my eyes rose the vision of that coarse-faced woman of 40, her hair forever in wild disarray like a madwoman's, creeping awkwardly down the hill after we had left, lips drawn tight in dreadful resolve, and then, on all fours, breaking off the plant. What a grotesque, and yet what a solemn, spectacle that must have been. Terror surged so strongly within me that I nearly cried out and bolted on the spot. And so the days passed. During that time I forced myself to forget the poor woman behind my house, though she was never far from my thoughts. I tried to avoid overhearing the household gossip. Each morning I went out early and lingered long at friends' houses, at the theater, or at the vaudeville hall, staying away from home until late at night. But at last, one day, I happened upon her unexpectedly in the narrow lane beside my house. When she saw me, she greeted me with a timid smile, a smile so ghastly to my eyes that it froze my blood. Her face, wasted as if from illness, drained of all color, peered out from beneath her disheveled hair in dreadful fashion. The harder I tried not to, the more my gaze was drawn downward, to the region of her sash. And there, just as I had expected, yet still, with a shock that made my heart leap, was her belly, flat and hollow, like that of a starving, emaciated dog, so sunken it seemed it might fold in two. And there is a little more to this story. About a month later, as I happened to pass by one of the rooms in the house, I overheard my grandmother and the maid engaged in a curious conversation. "It must be a flowing month," said my grandmother's voice. "Oh, madam." Of course, her laughter was never quite so merry, but that was the maid's voice. "But you said so yourself, didn't you? First, the postman's wife—" Here my grandmother twisted her finger for emphasis. then Kitamura's Okane, and then the candy. Seller's, what was her name? Ah, yes, Rui. There, you see? 3 of them in this very block. That's why I say, this month is a flowing month. How light my heart felt upon hearing that. In an instant, the whole world seemed to me utterly changed, a thing strange and unrecognizable. So, this is what life is, I thought. What that meant, I could not have explained even to myself, but such words rose unbidden in my mind. Without delay, I left by the front entrance, unable to resist once more going to the foot of that hill. That day, too, was brilliantly clear, a mild day of late autumn. From the boundless blue sky, some bird or other circled in wide, leisurely arcs. I had no trouble at all finding the plant again, but what a sight! Every stalk, without exception, had been broken halfway up, leaving behind nothing but wretched, mutilated husks exposed to the air. Perhaps it was the mischief of the neighborhood boys, or perhaps it was not. To this day, I do not know which it was,